Schönen guten Abend, good evening. My name is Peter Rantaša. I am the scientific curator of the exhibition The City as a Data Field, and I welcome you. I apologize, the director of the museum, Graz Museum, and my co-curator Otto Hochreiter, who will join us soon. So it is my pleasure to introduce our two guests for tonight, and I speak English, and I hope that is okay for you, because Guy Standing is already with us, as we are together right now. That means online. You don't see him, he's a bit a ghost, but a listening ghost for the moment. So, Guy Standing is an economist, had professorships on several English and an Australian university, and he was a director of the socio-economic security program of the International Labour Organization, which is, in this respect, we were nearly colleagues, because I was once on the board of the UNESCO kind of cultural organization with music. But so the International Labour Organization is in the framework of the United Nations, the body that deals with the field of work and labor. And we have also here a founding member and honorary co-president of the Basic Income Earth Network. But I think Guy Standing will tell us about these ideas a bit later. I also welcome Gerald Bruchmann, who is actually the host for tonight. He runs this co-working space, SPACELEND, as far as I know, the oldest or first, one has to say, co-working space in Graz that has space for around 80 persons or workplaces, and gives space for new forms of working, collaborating. But we will begin with Gerald, who will introduce SPACELEND.
Thanks.
Welcome.
I will change to the... Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have prepared a little presentation for tonight. Yeah, here it is. When I ask people, do you know what co-working is? About 50% of the people do not know what it is, so perhaps I explain it a little. Co-working is something where we use an office as a shared office, where we use the space that we have in here together. What do we offer since 2014? The smallest thing we offer is a virtual office. So that means if you do not like to have your company running at home, you can have a professional address in here. We also take the letters you get, we open them, we scan them, we email you the letters. So this is the smallest thing, a virtual office. Apart from that, we also offer tables, so let's say working tables, on a very flexible way, from a daily ticket to a 10 times ticket to a flexible desk, to a fixed desk where you can leave your things and will be paid for a monthly fee. The fixed desk is monthly, you can monthly quit it, but a lot of our guests are here for years. Yeah, and the biggest thing we offer are offices, so 25 square feet offices where 4 people can stay in there. And for all these people who use these desks, they all can use the whole infrastructure that we offer here, but I will explain a little later. And what else do we offer? We sell the event room and meeting rooms for an evening, on an hourly base for externals. So what is the size in here? We have about 1,400 square meters, sorry. We have 83 workplaces. We have 6 meeting rooms, a seminar room, this event room where we are in here now, where 120 people might have a place to sit when there's no pandemic. And we also have storages and parking places, which we also share on a fair use basis. So what is the advantage in here? I already mentioned the infrastructure is fully included. What is the infrastructure? It's not only, for example, you can compare it with a normal office. If you want to open or rent an office, what do you need? You need to find the office, you need electricity, you need a printer, you will need the furniture, you will need a kitchen, you will need the tables in, the spoon, hundreds of things. All this is included here. So if you come to us and rent a table, you get the full infrastructure, including the internet, the parking places, and so on. And apart from that, you also get a big network of about 50, 60 companies at the moment. And this network is next to you. And what I will explain later, my job is to connect you. So this is pretty inspiring. On the one hand, it's pretty motivating. And it's a lot cheaper than to rent a normal office. And you have a short period of commitment, so you can quit every month. So what are the customers that use such a shared space? 1/3 of them are startups, young people who want to, who have a business idea, who are 2 or 3 people, want to launch something, programming an app or something. A second third is our employees of companies who are outside of Graz. So we have a lot of people who have their headquarters in Switzerland, in Salzburg, in Vienna. And they did not find an employee at their hometown or at their headquarters. So they hired persons in Graz and based them here and paid a table for these employees. And the last third are what we in German call EPUs. I don't know a perfect translation of this. These are entrepreneurs who are alone, come mainly from the creative industry, filmmakers, photographers, people who are a one-woman or one-man show and will stay like this. So perhaps I tell you about a few space life stories, I call it. Stories about people who use this space. First, perhaps there are a lot of women, mainly, who work part-time. So 20 hours a week, they often use a space. As I already mentioned, if they have the headquarters outside, so they mainly work remote with their company, using all kind of technologies like Teams, like Slack, and all of these. We also have a free church in here, which is making every Saturday at 17 o'clock their worship in here. So in this space, 6 musicians get up on the stage, effect lights, and if there's no pandemic, also 70, 80 people are in there for every Saturday. And they said they want to be in the middle of young people, in the middle of where such young things happen. They want to be completely different than a classic church. What else do we have here? A non-profit association for startups, which is now at the second floor. It's a student organization, I would say, who gives startups a stage. They're called Ideentriebwerk, based here in Graz. They make every month a small event normally where startups can pitch themselves, where they can meet other startups, where business angels are, and so on. So they're using this space. And perhaps one story about a startup which has just moved out on Saturday. They are developing a hydrogen product. 3 years ago, I guess, a first person moved in here with a flexible desk, just making research about the future hydrogen product. Then in the next years, he hired people, so they moved into an office of us, our biggest office where 8 people maximum have place. And on this Saturday, they have moved out because they have grown so big that we do not have the place for them to grow furthermore, because they also need a Betriebsstättengenehmigung, don't know English word for that, a Betriebsstättengenehmigung for a big hydrogen testing container. So this is not possible here. Yeah, and a last story about a person who is sitting today in here. A classic filmmaker, freelance, making image movies, Astrid. So if anyone wants an image movie, you can ask her. She's writing the story, she's making the movie itself as a one-woman show. Yeah, space stories. And I wrote in here, flexibility is key. So what does that mean? Flexibility, in my opinion, is not only time-wise, it's also locally, because people work outside, work part-time here, work part-time at home, work part-time at the headquarters. It's technologically, you have to be in work, you have to be very flexible on new technologies who came up. If we just look at trends like Clubhouse, who has just become one of the biggest audio meeting apps, and in terms of price, which is also my part to offer for every flexible need the perfect price. So what is my job as an operator in here? I would say 3 things. The first thing is be there when they need you. So I need to be reachable, I need to be here, I need to ask them what they need. I need to get a feeling of when will they expand, when do they don't have enough money because the business is not running. Perhaps I have another solution which is more flexible, and so on. So be there when they need you. The second thing is let them concentrate on work. My job is to do everything what has nothing to do with their work. So I fill up the refrigerator with the drinks. I cook for them once a month. I get them together for a happy hour in the evening. I care about the internet, the cleaning, so that you really can concentrate on the work. Yeah, and the third thing is bring them together, as I mentioned. This is a happy hour. This is a coffee break. We also use a little technology on this. So my last thing is to show you a bit about the technologies we use in here. Tech gimmicks, I call it. The first thing is what we call the button. So we have a small website with 3 buttons on. If anyone wants to drink a coffee, he can click this button on the website, and we have a light which goes on in several rooms and blinking, so everyone knows, okay, somebody wants to drink a coffee. And you also get a push notification on your mobile phone. Same happens for a beer. Don't know if anybody's drinking beer. And if my lunch is ready, or we cook at least once or twice a week in here, so not only me is cooking, so yeah, the button. The second thing, we connect each other via Slack. Since years, this is working pretty well. For every important news in here, we use Slack. Yeah, somebody has had a marriage, as we see. Yeah. And the third thing, yeah, we use a Google Calendar, which is not the most sophisticated technology, but it's working pretty well. It's free of charge. It's open on every device. So to book one of the 6 meeting rooms, we use a Google Calendar. Yeah, that is pretty much the first input from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerald. One quick question I would have to you. You told us about the users of this space, the people who spend their time here. What do you think is their motivation? Do they work for money, or do they work from an intrinsic standpoint of motivation?
I would say all people who are self-employed work intrinsic, motivated. Mm-hmm. People who are employed, both might be, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I raised this point because our guide through the topic of datafication, which is the main theme of the exhibition Data Field, Willem Flusser, talks about freedom and work and this relation, and that is a complicated one. First, my question, who of you has seen this exhibition actually already? Okay, so let's say 40%. Even if we are actually going through the visionary part of our festival exhibition, I briefly explain what this exhibition is about. It's about datafication, a new historic moment of industrialization. Some dub it industrialization 4.0. That's the one that comes after digitization, basically starting around 2010 with the advent of mobile phone metadata, big data amounts that came out actually as metadata from communication, and on the other hand, deep machine learning, new ways of doing artificial intelligence that provides total new ways actually how we can deal with information. And that is basically turning everything we know around, and this we tried to illustrate with 8 chapters provided by a 30-year-old narrative of Willem Flusser, a media philosopher who actually died exactly 30 years ago in an accident. And as a Jew, he had to leave his home country and was all over the globe. And he always saw communication technology as a bridge, as a possibility to bridge the abyss between people. So his whole topic is about building a new we by the means of technology. And if we talk about vision, and 2050 was one of the numbers that we have thrown up in the air a bit, because it's now in every news headline when bad weather is happening, because we have 2050 climate change goals to reach. So the question is, how do we want to work 2050? The vision of Willem Flusser in general terms was that these new technologies bring out the possibilities that are already given in the relationships of humans. But we have only reduced ourselves to some of this relationship, and to materialize actually the full possibility of humans, that is what we have technology for. And we talked about a chapter of designing technology, and the word designing in German is entwerfen, is the game of getting out of the being thrown into existence, being a subject subordinated to objects. And if we have computers, he says, and dissolve all stable objects into data points, why not use this cloud of data dust and project it? Means put it together in a way how we like it. What does stop us here? And that is the topic of from subject to project, and this we try to realize in this exhibition. And the chapter of work, for those who have not been there, we built a little Schlaraffenland. I do not know exactly the translation of Schlaraffenland to English. It's a fairy tale of a country where when you open the mouth, the food is flying into your mouth and you don't have to do anything, actually. The main challenge is to get there. And as a good philosopher, Willem Flusser talks about the difference between work time and free time, and makes a lot of hilarious fun about freedom and work, starting from his own experience, because his family died there, saying that on the entrance of the KZ was written Arbeit macht frei, und das ist eine Lüge. And from there he develops actually the idea that we have to figure out ways of working, and as a good philosopher he engineers this concept and makes a differentiation between work as some active thing of labor, of some passive thing of suffering, and actually a third thing which is called operating, operare, like opera. And this is what he is aiming for, with the idea basically that we are playful beings, not homo faber but homo ludens, who is actually without any pressures and forces contemplating his or her destiny in the future. That's his idea, very Platonic by the way, and all the work goes to the machines. And he says if there is still work left that we don't want to do, then we have built wrong technology. That's his point, and that's the starting point, saying 2050, we go for a long way with, until then, with the development of this technology revolution that just started with datafication. And I give the word to Guy Standing, who is actually dealing with the future of work in an inspiring way. Guy, are you with us?
Finally, I've been watching you, and I've been inspired by Gerard's description of his work, and I congratulate him on what he's doing, because it's very much relevant to what I would like to talk about this evening. And I really wish I were there with you in Graz. It's a place I've visited a few times and always enjoyed my visits. And it's always enjoyable to be talking about these things informally afterwards over that proverbial beer that Gerard was mentioning. So I missed that part of it. What I want to talk about is a series of books that I've been writing, and it's culminating in what I've called a progressive politics of time. And it goes back to the ancient Greeks. And the ancient Greeks had a very clear set of distinctions that relate to Willem Flusser's conceptualization that's just been mentioned. But for the ancient Greeks, they had 5 types of time use, in effect. The first was labor. And labor was done by the non-citizens, by the banosoi, the metics, the slaves. It was not done by the citizens. the citizens did work that was activity in and around the home, and it was focusing on reproduction, relationships, and praxis, in a sense that work was reproductive, preserving, and culturally enriching. But more importantly, they made a distinction between recreation, which they regarded as vital for health, mental and physical health, and for relaxation, and leisure. And leisure, they had the term schole or skole, which meant a combination of education, public education, and public participation in the life of the polis, in the public domain. And that a citizen aspired to do as much activity in that sense as possible. But in addition to leisure, the skole, they also valued contemplation, or what we might call idleness. And of course, Aristotle gave a particular value to what he called ergia, literally being idle. And he regarded being idle and doing nothing as vitally important for a good life. And of course, in the modern parlance, most bourgeois social scientists and politicians condemn idleness, but the Greeks understood that we need it. But in addition, I think that the Greeks and our ancestors going back hundreds of years also valued the activity of what I'm calling commoning, working, sharing activities in the commons, outside the zone of private property. And I think that this sense of commoning has been degraded in the past century or more to the point where we need to revive it dramatically. Now, as we know, gradually throughout history, the stupidity of how we regard what is work and what is not work became gradually more and more stupid. So when by the time of the 18th century, the physiocrats and the founding fathers of modern economics, they regarded, first of all, only agricultural labor as productive, and then only producing things as productive. And Immanuel Kant even went as far as to say anybody doing what we now call services, which are all the things that Gerard has been talking about, for instance, what we call services, he said, are unfit to allow somebody to be a citizen. And Adam Smith also dismissed as unproductive all of those things that we call services. In the 19th century, the doctrine of laborism became a fanatical aspect of early capitalism, in which many people, hundreds of thousands in Britain, for example, were branded with a V on them if they were regarded as not doing labor or not doing enough labor. And we had a situation where people were literally forced to do labor. And this doctrine gradually evolved in the course of the development of capitalism until we have the ridiculous situation at the beginning of the last century, when we have an alliance, in effect, between the socialists, the social democrats, and the right, saying that labor is ennobling, labor is the only thing that you should be doing, and if you didn't labor and you were poor, you should starve. And then, of course, they moved to the next stage of labor by tying social security to the performance of labor. And we get to the situation where all work that is not labor is regarded as non-work. So from the beginning of the last century, the work that more people do more than anything else became non-work. And that is the work of women doing care. And we've had the suffering of our interpretation and our rhetoric and our policies as a result of that. So care work, unpaid care work, which we've regarded as vital during the course of this pandemic, was non-work. And we are still in a rhetorical trap in which our textbooks, our politics, our commentaries treat only work in an office or in a factory or for labor, for money as work. But of course, much of the other activities are work. Now, in the course of that development, we've had a very important sense of time change. In an agrarian society, you couldn't regulate by the clock. You didn't use the clock. It was the seasons, the weather that determined how much time you spent on different activities. In the industrial capitalism era, life was divided into blocks of time. You got up in the morning, you went to the factory, very late at night, you went home, may have had some sex, went to sleep. Next day, the same thing. And then life was divided. You had a few years of schooling, then a life of labor, short period of retirement, drop dead. But today, in the course of the last 40 years, we have moved into what I call a tertiary time regime. And this is very important for the next set of points I'm going to make, because with tertiary time, the boundaries between the different activities, work, labor, leisure, recreation, break down. And we have a situation where more and more people don't have a sense of control over their time. And this goes with the development of the new global class structure. And we cannot understand the world of work and the impact of technologies without understanding the class structure we're facing today. And that class structure is essentially part of what I've called rentier capitalism, where more and more of the income is going to the owners of technology, the owners of property, the owners of finance, and less is going to those who rely on labor. And we've had the development of a new mass class that is defining the world of work and labor today. And that mass class is the precariat. Millions and millions of people are now in the precariat all over the world. My book on the precariat has been translated into 23 languages, and every single day I receive emails from people around the world telling me that they belong to the precariat. What this means is in 3 dimensions. First, if you're in the precariat, you have specific relations of production. You are unstable in your labor. You have insecure labor. But more importantly, you have to do a lot of work for labor that doesn't get counted as work or remunerated as work. And it's not in our statistics. People in the precariat have to do a lot of work looking for labor. They have to do a lot of work trying to obtain entitlements in the state, work for the state. They have to do a lot of work reproducing their skills, new types of tricks. And moreover, if you're in the precariat, your level of education, formal schooling, is usually greater than the type of labor you have to perform. This is a very distinctive combination. Second, people in the precariat have distinctive relations of distribution. What that means is that if you're in the precariat, you have to rely almost entirely on money wages. You don't get access to non-wage benefits. You don't get access to rights-based state benefits. And you find that your income is uncertain and fluctuating, and such that you have to rely on debt. Now, debt means that if you're in the precariat, you are always on the edge of unsustainable debt, where one mistake, one accident, one illness, and you could be homeless and in deprivation. And the feature of being in the precariat as a result of those two aspects is that you have unbounded rationality. You do not know what is the best optimum uses of your time. You suffer from the fact, should I do more of this? Should I do more of that? Should I do more of this? Should I do this? And this leads to what I call the precariatized mind, the feeling that time is out of control. And this, of course, induces mental ill health, stress, suicidal tendencies, and profound existential alienation. And that leads to the third aspect of being in the precariat. You have distinctive relations to the state. What that means is you're not a full citizen. You're what I call a denizen, a person who's losing social rights, losing civil rights, losing economic rights, losing political rights. And that leads to the most important, challenging issue of being in the precariat. You feel like a supplicant. The original Latin for precarity was to obtain by prayer. And that's how it feels. You have to be asking for favors, relying on discretionary judgment of a bureaucrat, a landlord, an employer. And this, of course, is undignified, and it is personally and socially very dangerous. And why populists are getting the support of some of the less educated in the precariat, because they want yesterday back. The progressive part, and I suspect the people working with Gerard and so on in your workstation, is essentially more the progressive type. They want more education. They don't want yesterday back. They want a new politics, a new progressive politics. And in the process of the technological change that we're experiencing, we've got platform capitalism, which of course is globalizing the labor market. And that means that increasingly labor will be done online through apps or through labor brokers, so that you'll be competing, somebody in Graz will be competing with someone in Manchester or someone in Goa or someone in Accra. And this is driving wages down and making even greater uncertainty. And as part of this AI technological revolution, you have a new phenomenon which goes alongside automation, which is called heteromation. And heteromation means that this is the first technological revolution in history, which is generating more work and less labor. More people have to do more work that is not labor than any time in the past. Work for labor, they have to do it. And this reflects this lack of control over time. So in that context, what is to be done? Well, first of all, I think we have to have a global campaign to end the fetish of jobs, end the putting on a pinnacle being in a job. Many people have to be in a job, it's instrumental, the motivation is extrinsic, not intrinsic, and that's the reality. But let us not be stupid enough to regard being in a job as something that is nirvana and to be promoted above all other aspects. We have to de-emphasize being in a job. That means we have to promote the right to work more than the duty to labor. And that is one of the reasons why I've advocated for the past 30 years or more, we need a basic income as an anchor for a new income distribution system and a politics of time built round giving people basic security. We need basic income for common justice. We need basic income for liberal freedom, a freedom to be moral. You can't be moral if you're doing things out of necessity. You can only be moral if you can make a decision on what to do. It also enhances republican freedom, the freedom of a person, a freedom from domination by others. A freedom, not that I can do something because you say I can do something, but a freedom for me to make the decision. And that, I think, is vital in the future of work. But in addition, a basic income would encourage people to do more of the good work that we would like many of us to be doing, more care work rather than labor, more ecological work, more community work, and more commoning. I've been advocating too that we should restore the sense of the allotments, the Schiebergarten that epitomizes commoning, the allotments. Because the allotments are a reflection of commoning, of sharing, and they can be generalized. And I think Gerard's sort of activity in that respect is moving in that direction of commoning. They also have commoning now taking place in the sea areas, sea gardens, beautiful concept. And in the sense of commoning, we need to enable people to be able to make those choices more freely. And that means giving subsidies to these sorts of collective activities, giving voice organizations to doing commoning. And this, I think, will reflect a sense of a progressive politics of time in which the essence of our objective is to obtain more control of our time so as to be spending more of it on work, not labor, and on leisure in the Greek sense of schole, of public participation in the life of our communities and our countries and internationally. And that, I think, is deliberative democracy that we need to promote and support as part of this new politics of time. So for me, it's a different way of looking at work, and we must escape from the laborism that is still dominating our mainstream politicians. I think this is a crisis, this pandemic, which is telling us that we will only have resilience, both individually and collectively, if everybody has basic security. That's why we need a basic income. But we need the space to do work that is not labor. And that, I think, is the challenge ahead. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Guy, for your very concrete proposals that actually meets a lot of discussions we have right now here in Austria and I guess everywhere else. Just today I was reading in the newspaper, we have a political debate of part-time support for part-time contracts to support families. We have this situation that families cannot live on part-time income, so the state should subsidize. That was one of the questions. It's not the basic income request, but it goes, I would say, in this direction. And many other debates that we had in the last week, talking about families in this situation, that perfectly meets your point about this unpaid work that was part of the citizens in Greek and so on. So my question is to you, actually, would you really, we have this German, we don't have this German distinction in like labor and work. We have Arbeit, and Arbeit is more or less everything. Ja, Hausarbeit ist dasselbe wie Pflegearbeit oder Fabrikarbeit. We say immer Arbeit. So my question is it actually that what you refer to as work, not actually something else in the way that I go back to William Flusser, who says, if you do this, what you like you said, and you would do that without payment, I would not call it Arbeit. This is what Flusser says. Would you agree on this? Do we need to really reconceptualize actually what we understand by work?
Yeah. Let me. 2 points you've made. I'll deal with the second one first. I think the concept of work that I'm talking about and the Greeks articulated, I think is closer to your word beruf, is it not? Which is a calling, a vocation, an activity that is for its own sake.
Sorry,
for
German word, can you repeat it, please? The German word.
Beruf.
Beruf. Beruf from Berufung, calling. I understand.
Yeah. Okay. But Beruf. Now, if you look at most languages, they actually have they do have implicit distinctions. For example, in French, travail is close to labor, that's labor, and it comes from the Latin to torture, okay? And they have activité, which is closer to the idea of work. The same, actually, Chinese, Mandarin have 2 words that are close to being the difference between labor and work. And many other languages do when you look at them. But I think the essence of work is that it has use value. It has use value, but may not have exchange value, to go using a Marxist dichotomy. So I think that we do need to reconceptualize work. That is absolutely clear. And we need to be very clear in ourselves in the way we use words. And particularly in the English language, too many people just say work when they mean labor, and they don't have a word for unpaid activities that are just the same, except that they call it unpaid work. But it's not. What we're trying to say is that you need to reconceptualize to give a value to these other forms of work. The second thing I think is the point you made in your first comment about part-time. I think one of the worst things to do is to have strong regulations and subsidies for particular divisions of labor. I think it'd be much better if we looked at the nature of capitalism and build capital funds and compensate people that way and allow people to make choices between giving more time to labor, more time to leisure, more time to political activities, more time to the allotments, etc. So I think it's a matter of freeing people rather than deal with piecemeal with particular types of contracts. Let the contracts come out in free negotiations.
Thank you. One more question before I open to the audience. You mentioned it in your talk about the allies that forwarded this regime of labor. I think this request of subsidizing part-time came from the Social Democrats. I know that we have the unions that are strongly arguing for full-time jobs in the classic regime, so to say. And on the right side, we just have a new Minister of Labor, or Wirtschaft, both, I think so, I don't know, Kocher, who actually said that in the post-COVID situation, it should not be like some people on the left side requested that the Arbeitslosengeld, the money that you get when you lose your job for the first month, should be not 55% but 80% of your last salary. That was a request, and he said no, because then there is no incentive to go to work. So basically it's exactly like you said, the right-wing people need to threat that you actually lose your right of existence if you don't work, like like you pointed out. My question is, in this landscape, in this political landscape, who are the actors that forward our development in the direction that you have outlined? Who could be a new coalition in this direction?
I think the Social Democrats have become the reactionary political movement of our time. And I say that without pleasure. For a long time, Social Democrats and socialists were progressives. They were reducing inequalities and so on. But I think they're trapped in laborism, in wanting everybody to be in full-time jobs. If you think about being in a job, you are in a position of subordination to a boss. You are in a position of saying, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, I'll do that. Thank you very much, sir. You are in a position of alienation. Now, we need jobs. I'm not questioning that, but it's important psychologically if people can distance themselves from their job. I think that's healthy. And I think that the precariat that I'm talking about, they understand intuitively this reality. And that is why the trade unions all over the world have been losing and losing and losing and losing and losing. And social democrat parties that used to be the majority are now, even in places like Sweden, about 30% or less. And they're being wiped out in places like the Netherlands because they are not moving with the times and moving to a reconceptualizing of what people want to do and how they want to do it. I would be very surprised if people who are the startups, people who are in the precariat and what I call proficients, who've got technical skills and technical abilities, they won't be voting for Social Democrats unless for a negative reason. The far right is powerful, therefore we have to beat the far right, something like that. But inspirationally, the Social Democrats have become conservative with a small c and reactionary rather than forging a new future that corresponds to this technological revolution, corresponds to the time revolution, and corresponds to the aspirations of the educated part of the precariat. So for me, it's a very interesting time. We may have a shift to authoritarianism, Trump and the rest of it, or we have a new progressive politics. And I hope, obviously, that that's the second is what happens.
Thank you. At this point, I would like to invite everyone here on the spot to join our discussion. And I might start again with our German wording. Yeah, we have, if you are employed in a job, you are unselbstständig beschäftigt. Unselbstständig. It means, how can you translate unselbstständig? Does anyone know? You're not able to take care for yourself. Ja, abhängige Beschäftigte. Yeah, so dependent on workers. Versus the entrepreneurs, the startups, the self-employed, whatever, they are called the selbstständig. And selbstständig means that they actually, like you pointed out, negotiate in their field all the relations to the customers, to the state, to all their environment on themselves. Nobody else is doing that for them. That's selbstständig, I would say. And it's a total different legal status in a way that you even lose protection. Like if you buy some, let's say, bad furniture because you want to start a bar and you buy this as selbstständig, yeah, then all the consumers' rights don't help you. Yeah, you are in the mess. Yeah, so you might be one. Happened to me. I run a music underground club, and we just had this case. Just that's out of anecdotal reality. So my question is exactly like you say. It's more and more and more work to be entrepreneurial and so on. And my question would be, how could the Ich AGs, we had these words, yeah, these me and myself kind of entities, find ways to solidarize? They cannot form unions actually, and the chambers of commerce don't support them. So my question is, what kind of organizational structure would you find in this way is beyond your informal support that you give already, to build up momentum in the better direction. Gerald, I would like to ask you, and then because you work with this audience, so to say, and then I would like to ask you, Guy, from your international perspective.
So the support we might give them beyond, you mean?
Yeah, and how to organize actually these interests, that are separated. Everybody is completely full with maintaining the work that one has.
I mean, one possibility we already started in here a little is to help them to organize the accounting, for example. If they are not an expert in accounting, somebody else could do this for them on a shared way, for example.
So sharing resources.
Sharing,
like legal advice, for instance.
Yeah.
Very important. I don't know. I just want to say, if you are a startup, because you talked about non-citizens, work that is done by slaves. One of my best friends is a lawyer, actually, who is representing founders of startups against the investors, because he said that's the new slavery. You have contracts actually to raise your capital that make you work 80 hours concerning the time regime, 80 hours a week for years. And if it does not scale up, like the good example of the hydrogen business, then all your work is doomed. All your, and the company sold and whatever. So how would be the international perspective of organizing this kind of individualist fighters?
Let me try to answer your question by looking at historical developments. The original early period of the development of labor and work and commoning was done through the occupational guilds, and going back to ancient China through the guilds of Florence and the guilds of most countries. And they were essentially communities of people doing closely related occupations, professions, or crafts. And they provided what Gerard was just talking about. Within those guilds, they would have a form of social protection for their members. They would have advisory services provided by the elderly workers down through to the apprentices. Now, it had certain disadvantages, the guilds, because they were tended to be monopoly organizations. So you need to avoid that sort of problem. But you need a voice system in which people can give mutual aid to each other. That's vital. The trade unions don't do that. They don't look after what people do. They focus on the relations between laborers and capital, understandably, but they're not built for doing this sort of voice security. And in addition, of course, a basic income would allow startups and potential entrepreneurs a freedom to fail, a freedom to take risks, because they know that if it fails, they will still have enough for their food and their rent going down the road. I'll give you an example, which I think is rather relevant. The man who today is the richest man entrepreneur in Great Britain, unfortunately, he backed Brexit and then left the country for tax reasons. But he wrote saying that he experimented with his inventions. And 2,619 times he failed. And then on the 2,620th time, his invention came through. Now, of course, he was only able to do that because he had a basic income provided by his wife. Now, that is what we really want for everybody, that everybody has a cushion so that they can take risks and be entrepreneurial in the brain, be creative. And this Promethean image of work must be liberated. And I think that this is what we're trying to do today, to liberate people who are educated but unable to be entrepreneurial in that rich sense, not in the sense of making lots of money, but in the sense of being creative, being reproductive, looking after ourselves, our environment, and resisting extinction. So this is all going together with the ecological challenge. How we rearrange work is linked to the ecological challenge of our generation.
Thank you. I would like to invite you, who are here on the spot, to share your thoughts on these ideas of basic income. Is this something that you envision for yourself, maybe for your kids, or is this an idea that you find is an idea of dreamers that has no chance and is against our reality? What's your opinion here? Does anyone want to comment on it? Okay. I don't know. Did I raise the bar too high with my question? So then, otherwise I would be happy for any comment, if you like to. You totally agree? Yeah. And why do you think actually? Because I think it's so obvious. Why not everybody agrees?
Fear on not having a picture what it is. I think most of the times, especially if it's something about the future, you don't have a picture of it. So you can't imagine what it would be like. So it's like, it's a bit fearful. So I don't know what it's going to be like. So, and I always think, like, for example, what's the picture of Graz in 2050? I mean, there are so many plans building like a metro or things, but what is the picture of Graz in the future? I think it needs a picture, and from that you can make Maßnahmen.
If you're interested in our exhibition, we have the video, a view out of the window of a fictive house in 2050, and then you see a Graz of the future. And you see it actually developing from a dystopian to a kind of utopian approach, if you like. So it's a 3 minutes transition that we have staged in a kind of dreamy aesthetics. It's a nice Graz artist group. But the point is, of course, nobody can know. Did you understand actually the comments? Because I don't know if you have a hand microphone here. Did you understand the
roughly?
Yeah.
I think I did. I think I did. My own answer to the imagining the future, the World Economic Forum, that's the Davos people, they asked me, could you write an essay on how you would envisage the future in 2050, and if your sort of policies came into effect. And it's had a lot of hits, of views. I think we are talking about a very practical approach. It's not utopian, it's not dreaming. We can really afford, in every country, in Austria or anywhere else, easily afford that every citizen has basic security. Don't tell me you can't afford it. Of course we can afford it. It's a matter of finding the mechanisms. And today we have potentially the ability to create capital funds from which to pay out people's basic income. Interestingly, at the moment, since the pandemic struck, COVID struck, the beginning of last year, I've done over 100 Zoom events on basic income in about 40 countries, and the movement for basic income is global. And as we are sitting here, there are pilots, basic income experiments going on in 45 American cities. There are pilots going on in numerous countries, and there's quite a strong prospect that governments will come in the next year or so who are openly supporting a basic income. This is much greater support now than it was 5 years ago or 2 years ago. And in opinion polls around Europe, a majority now support it, whereas before many people didn't even know of it. So for me, I think what is a dream one day suddenly becomes pretty obvious. We can say that with many other ideas. And it's so important for those of us who are fortunate to be in the creative field, and that includes museums, that includes art galleries, it includes the sort of things that Gerhard is doing, where we are able to be creative and provide ideas and provide real choices. I think this is a very fertile period in history. And I think the realities could change quite quickly, and they must. They must.
Thank you. For me personally, I fully subscribe to this, because my answer would be, of course, nobody knows the future by 2050, but it is so profound that I know one thing for sure: it won't run linear from here to there, and it will not be the same in any case. So coming back to Flusser, if we change, then we change for a good thing and not for a bad thing, because we have to change in any case. And that ideas that we're just discussing are a very good approach on that. One last question concerning technology. You know, when the first weaving machineries came up, there were these Luddites, kind of opposing technology to maintain jobs, actually, even if the jobs might not have been nice, but preventing new technology eating up existing jobs. Yeah, that was one approach that we have seen in history, and we see this opinion also quite often nowadays. My question would be, we could also see it the other way around, actually, to say, actually, we should really put even more effort to create technologies, again, once more saying to Flusser, that work that cannot be done by the machines is actually that one that we want to do. Or you could say we leave out that work that we want to do and don't give that to the machines. But all the work we don't like, or the labor, I have to say here to stay in the terminology, actually, all this labor should be given to the machines that can be given. Nobody needs to do a job that he or she has to be threatened into because of no motivation. So my question would be on you, how do you see the role of technology and the developers of technology and the universities, all the knowledge production in this direction that's going on?
I have been surprised and fortunate. I've been invited to Silicon Valley to talk about these themes, and to Singularity University, and to many of the executives of the technology giants. And what I've found is that a growing proportion of all those people are supportive of the basic income precisely because they understand that the biggest effect of the technological revolution is to increase inequality. And this is partly because we have a disgusting intellectual property rights regime, so that inventions, even the small ones, can lead to having patents that give monopoly profits to a corporation for 20 years. This is ridiculous because they can make huge monopoly profits. And the inequalities that are linked to the technological revolution mean we have to find mechanisms to recycle the income that's going to a tiny plutocracy. We have to do that, because otherwise the social explosion will continue to provide potential Donald Trumps, Bolsonaro's, Boris Johnson's. You have yours, we know them. People who will play on fear, will play on fear. We must avoid that. We must avoid that.
Our exhibition in the museum ends with a long bet. Actually, it was a bet that was the first time set up in 1995, I think, by Kevin Kelly from the Wired magazine, one of the leading magazines for these digerati new technology things. And I forgot who was his opponent, but basically they had three conditions. The bet was our society will break down by 2020, or our society will flourish by 2020. And there were three conditions and they were interlinked. Condition one was our society will explode because of inequality, just like you said, so that the people cannot communicate anymore. Second point was our economy will explode because of monopoly, so the whole currency exchange system, everything will collapse. And the third was our ecological environment will collapse because of exploitation, over-exploitation, and so on. 2020, this bet was more or less even in a way, because when we talk about inequality, that this is a problem nobody can deny, and the environment is flooding us now on daily basis, actually even here in Graz, and telling us, I'm here and I count. The money system still is in place. So that's why the bet was not lost by the, so that's why it's equal. So we put up this long bet for 2050 and asked the people after our exhibition, what do you vote for, so to say? Will it be dystopian catastrophe or so? And the majority is actually optimistic. That's what I can say. So I would raise the question here, what do you think, 2050, we will do fine or we will be doomed? Okay, I had one vote positive, we will do fine. Two votes positive, we will be fine. And one comment.
My comment was just, I was optimistic, but in the general, so the question was different a little bit in the exhibition.
Okay.
It was not the society, but also the whole world. So I'm optimistic about everything, but not on humans, maybe. Yeah. And I just want to add a different question, which I don't know how to answer, because who will do our bad jobs now? So we have a lot of bad jobs and people do it because of money. Who will clean our streets? Who will clean the toilets? Who will be a bus driver? If anyone gets money and says, okay, I'm fine, who will do these jobs?
Yeah, Guy Standing.
Yeah,
Yes?
I mean, I love that question, because the great thing is that if we had a basic income, you as an employer of a person cleaning the toilets would have choices. You would have the choice to make people clean their own toilets, or automate toilet cleaning, or to raise the wages until enough people say, for that wage, I'm going to do it. Okay, and it's the same with a lot of other boring, unattractive jobs. I'm all in favor of automating those jobs, and the best way would be to push up the price, push up the wage for paying people to do that. And if you had high wages for that sort of job, then you're going to find that there'll be enough people who will want the extra money and want to buy a car or buy whatever it might be, that they would do it. And I think forcing up the wages for people required to do those sorts of jobs would be a great thing, because they are chronically underpaid. They're only doing it out of fear and insecurity, and that is disgraceful. In a civilized society, we should not accept that.
There's another question or comment?
Yeah, it's a comment also about the envisioning the future with basic income, because I also think my colleague from university and me, we did our master thesis about artistic visions of universal basic income, and it was actually we didn't find a lot of artistic creations or reflections on that topic, which is kind of strange actually. But I also, for another project, I was working for one day with a street cleaner in Vienna. And I asked him, because it was shortly after, I guess it was Volksabstimmung, like a public election about the basic income in Austria. And he said, yeah, he went there for voting, but actually he doesn't believe in that because it was actually a trust issue somehow. He says, if they give us money, they will take us away the money somewhere else. So I think it's mainly a trust issue from the people who are in the precariat somehow, that they don't believe that it's getting better somehow with the basic income. Because then like the prices are rising and so on. So it's mainly a trust issue, I would say.
You would like to comment? Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad for a speaker to advertise his own book, but I've summarized all the evidence from experiments and pilots around the world in having basic income. I have been doing pilots in various countries, others have too. And one of the biggest things you get with a basic income is people's mental health improves. And that's so important for making good decisions and developing this trust. And it also improves the status of women. It improves schooling. It improves solidarity, a sense of participation, and it results in an increase in work, contrary to the prejudiced people, not a decreasing of work. And the evidence is overwhelming. The book is called Basic Income and How We Can Make It Happen. And I think we are close to realizing that many of the prejudices, and I'm not saying that's what you're expressing, but many of the prejudices are that. But the evidence is accumulating from experiments, from experiments, from experiments. And that, I think, is gradually converting huge numbers of people to saying, we must have it.
What I find interesting on this last comment is we can say in general, our society is based on fear, and actually having fear of a fear-reducing measure is an interesting flip, so to say, and it shows how strong this ideology of fear that has a long history in the Christian environment and so on, yeah, actually how deep this is rooted in our thinking. And I make this point actually also because to advertise a bit, not the book, but another panel that we have in 2 days in the Elevate Festival, a kind of summary, and there will be a friend of mine from India, Sangeeta Iswaran. She is doing actually community work, exactly that work that Guy Standing is describing. She's doing humanitarian work in southern India, now COVID relief, and so on. And she talks about something, and that I would like to mention here, which is called non-transactional relationships. That means if we can enter, and that's a visionary point, into a society that is not, I'm afraid that you, and then now I put a regime of forces and then tit for that, yeah? Because if I give you this, you won't give me anything and I will starve to death. The non-transactional relationship is much more in this commonality kind of thinking. I give because I care, yeah? I wish you well, yeah? And that is interesting because this ideology of labor has a strong spiritual background actually, and was introduced by churches. And I like it that here in this free workspace we have a free church actually worshipping, I don't know. So what I want to say, it's interesting how deeply these shifts have to go actually in the arguments, because we're so used to this kind of fear arguments that we hardly can imagine different ways. So that was a comment from my side. Listen to our future summaries and you will find it on the website. I'd like to ask you now, first Gerald and then Guy, for your closing remarks. If there are not any, I don't want to stop anyone from commenting.
One
more comment, oh sorry, before the last one. Yeah.
Thank you. During the first shutdown last year, I made an experiment with myself because it was home office and I knew my projects were on hold for a certain time, so I didn't have to work. And I thought, okay, let's just do what I want to do. So no need to work, no need to do anything, and just see what happens. And during the first week, I just did some researches on COVID and because I was interested in that. But then after a week, I noticed, no, it's getting boring. So I did playful things. And after the third week of not working, I started to work again on projects. And not because I had to do, because of time pressure, but only because I wanted to do something useful. And that's how I started again. So I think if we go to basic income, that's at some point what's going to happen with most of the people.
Thank you very much for this also positive comment on idle time that is quite productive. And that's why the Greeks had it and valued it, of course. Yeah. So
my question would...
Closing remarks, yeah, question, sorry.
A question to Guy. Is there no misabuse? Is there no disadvantage on this thing?
Basic income.
Yeah.
Well, I think with any policy, you're going to get somebody abusing the policy. I mean, you know, if you give person freedom, some people will abuse freedom, but we must favor freedom. We still support freedom. And I think that you really got to think about the human condition as what we would like for ourselves and for our children and for our friends and neighbors, and not for the persons who might abuse it, whether they spend the money on beer or gambling. Some do, maybe, but actually the evidence shows that more people reduce ads, reduce gambling and things. In our experiments in India, in Madhya Pradesh, for example, we provided thousands of people with a basic income, and the consumption of alcohol went down, and the collaborative work increased, and the sort of activities that the last speaker, I didn't catch her name, I'm sorry, but I thought her comments were really excellent. Basically, it goes back to the ancient thinking, and nobody put it better than Cato when he said, never is a man more active than when he's doing nothing. And we need that period of doing nothing in order to regenerate and evolve ourselves and become creative. And that, I think, is what you get if you trust people and you have a strategy for building security for everybody. Of course, there will be, as Gerard's pointed out, there will be abusers of a system, but there are many more who will actually benefit and behave better as a result of security.
Doing nothing with AI is actually the name of the space in our exhibition that you pass through before you enter the space of work. Yeah, so just a comment for those who have not seen the exhibition yet. And I would say running a music club, I just talk about my other way of existence in Vienna in a very bad neighborhood. I would suppose a basic income would reduce all of these street drug dealers, pickpockets. I don't know what people are running on the really lowest kind of criminal regime that you can have, and because they cannot make a living. Yeah, no way, because obviously they have no work permit because of citizen status and whatever. So I basically think again, the fear of a fear-reducing measure is interesting loop. Yeah, but thank you for raising that comment, because I think it's a quite often heard point and question. Yeah. Okay, so if we don't have any more comments, or do we? Then I would ask for the closing remarks. Would you like to start, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I just want to invite everyone to work in here, try out for a day for free of cost. There's nothing to lose, just to win new people, to get inspired, get motivated, get new friends perhaps. So get in here, try it out, work with us. We are open for everyone.
Thank you, Gerald. Guy.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and for listening to me, especially speaking in a foreign language. So I appreciate very much your patience. I would urge anybody who is interested to join the Austrian Network for Basic Income. We have some lovely people advocating it, fantastic people. And we're about to have our international congress in Glasgow. And the last Congress, there were people from 61 countries who participated. And I wish I were there to come to the exhibition, because it's a form of work that is really part of commoning. Having exhibitions and participating in collective artistic work is something that really we need to resurrect as part of the commons. It needs to be strengthened, and we need to do it ourselves. So thank you very much. I very much wish I were in Graz this evening, especially as I would share a good beer with you, Peter and Gerard, and others, I hope. So next time, thank you.
Next time, looking forward for the next time. We will work on the issues. We continue. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
Have a good night.
Okay.